How's it going? Welcome back to another great video with the majestic host, the Savior. That's right, welcome back, my wonderful wise ones. I'm pretty excited to talk about this game today because yes, we are blessed by Lord Jesus himself, by the great gods of Zeus and Cthulhu.
Cthulhu, Cthulhu. Yeah! The evil, hate-filled Cthulhu from a dimension far away.
Yes, that's right, we have been blessed yet again by the live service gods. The gods that sometimes taketh, but sometimes bringeth us some pretty good microtransactions. But seriously, it's not all bad. Some live service games have been absolutely incredible in the past. It's just a very difficult thing to get right, and now with modern day gaming, AAA games especially, focusing on live service games, we often get pieces of garbage, okay, and a lot of problems when it comes to live service games. Even big single player games, like something like Starfield, has kind of gone the live service route where, you know, you have to get it in installments, kind of.
What's that, Axeman? You expected this feature to work? Sounds like you haven't heard of a little thing called modern gaming.
Today we are going to be doing a deep dive of the First Descendant review, okay? This is something I feel that is, you know, quite important because this is kind of what modern day games have become, especially in the multiplayer scene. A lot of it is just geared and trending towards live service games, and honestly I don't really like it, but if we do get good live service games, then I'm okay with it if it's actually done right. But bear in mind that this is a free-to-play multiplayer game that is coming out very, very shortly, and if it's free-to-play, you know, you can excuse some of the more questionable microtransactions, some of the more, you know, lesser gameplay features that would be in a proper full release multiplayer game. This can still go either ways, good or bad, okay? And it's very important that we dissect this to make sure that it isn't actually, you know, wasting your time, and if this is actually something worth playing. So that's what I hope to answer today. Is the First Descendant worth playing? Is the First Descendant worth it? And should you play the First Descendant? So I do hope you enjoy this one, and if you are new to the channel, which is highly likely, make sure that you go down below and subscribe to the channel right now. It only takes 2 seconds, just 2 seconds of your time. I know time is limited, but I would appreciate it a lot, because the Wise One community is all that I am. This is everything that I care about, this YouTube channel. If you like gaming, analysis, and philosophical videos, I do both on this channel, so check them both out and join the Wise One community, subscribe. Thank you very much. So for people who don't know, what is the First Descendant? Well, let's quickly break that down, because this game has been called a lot of things. This has been called the Destiny Killer or the Warframe Killer, okay? But this is a free-to-play PvE action live service looter shooter to a degree. But I'll talk about that more in a second. The loot isn't exactly what we want from a looter shooter, so this might put some people off. It doesn't have PvP at the moment. This is only a PvE game for now, and you can play in solo, but also it is mostly a multiplayer game. Also, surprisingly, the First Descendant is very big around bosses, okay? It's got a big focal point around bosses, boss encounters, and a lot of people have compared the boss encounters to something out of Monster Hunter, and it does kind of have that vibe, similar to something like a third-person shooter version of Dragon's Dogma, or like I said, Monster Hunter, or even Shadow of the Colossus. The bosses are pretty cool, and I'll talk about that more later, and you can have a lot of fun, you know, fighting these bosses, but what's in between, the actual missions, the grind, the, you know, pay-to-win type aspects, the microtransactions, how much farming and grinding is there in a live service game, especially when, you know, you can just pay to win. Is that a problem or not? That's what I hope to answer today.
If you feel confused, just reload your gun.
If If you like more analysis type content and a deeper dive into the themes and the story and the philosophy of games, check out my yearly reviews where I do that as well. But this is an early review, so do bear that in mind. So I'm going to break it down into what I always do, the positives and the negatives, and I would say that this is quite a mixed bag, but luckily it is free to play, so I don't think people are going to be, you know, too hard pressed just to give this a try, and if it's not for you, it's no big deal. But still, you know, a lot of people are looking for a good multiplayer experience to sink their teeth into before something like Call of Duty Black Ops 6 comes out, or, you know, a lot of people have kind of finished with Destiny now, so they're looking for something new. So the first positive of this game is the modular customization, okay? So that's something I really appreciate. This isn't exactly a class-based game or anything like that, or even like a kind of perk tree. It is doing something a little bit different, and I do appreciate that because I am tired of the generic level up, skill up, you know, kind of point skill tree, perk tree, whatever. We've seen it so many times. I want something new. And this is, you know, kind of giving you a lot of player agency to create your own build with these different modules, okay? And basically these can be anything from, you know, massive power upgrades, AoE attacks, boosts in defense or attack, and some pretty cool abilities that you can unlock later. So I do like that system. That is a big positive for me. Also, you do get things like difficulty modifiers as well, so there is quite a lot of replayability here where you can, you know, customize it to what you want, and this will actually change what, you know, rewards you will get at the end of it, so that is good for people who do want a challenge. But now on to a small negative, and for me this is quite a big negative, because if a game doesn't have consistency, if it doesn't really have a strong theme, even a multiplayer experience where it's not really about immersion as much, it's more just about fun, that I still can't look past. And I think it's important, you know, to nail that in a game. Strong theme and tone. And I have to say that the art style, the graphics are of course very nice, you know, not amazing, but they're not bad. But the art style and the tone that this game is going for, it just doesn't work for me, okay? The environments are very bland. It almost looks like this is not quite a fully finished game at times. Boring. Luckily, the First Descendant has had much feedback over quite a chunk of time, which is good because they have refined it, but still, to me, it just looks unfinished. The environments are very boring and stale to look at. And just like the cosmetics, the art style of the characters, they kind of look like jumbled, just generic sci-fi. The girls are, you know, are of course in these ridiculous armored costumes with only their breasts and their ass standing out, and it's just, you know, funny. It's just quite generic. This feels like a generic gamer brand 101 pulled assets kind of thing. So I'm just not feeling it, but maybe some of you will like it. But it's just kind of very generic sci-fi with very generic looking costumes, weapons, all of that kind of stuff. Nothing really stood out to me. And even the enemies and the bosses, they don't really have a super cool aesthetic to them. Nothing that will stick in my mind that, you know, oh, I'll be thinking about this in a few years. Definitely not. So before we finish off with the positives and the negatives, I'll quickly say I am trying to do YouTube at the moment full time. June has been a very stagnant month with games and all of that stuff. So hopefully next month will be a lot better. But I do live stream now pretty much every single day from 8 AM JST time, Japanese Standard Time, up to 1 PM or around that time. So do jump into the live streams on YouTube if you are a subscriber or if you have just joined and have become a wise one. I appreciate it a lot. And if you do find this video useful, if I have helped save you money, perhaps consider supporting me, dropping a small donation. I would appreciate it a lot, as I am trying to do this full time. So let's continue. Another positive which I have added over time is how the grapple hook and everything works, the animations around that. That's got a lot better now, and it's pretty cool. This does add a layer of verticality to the combat, so it's not just, you know, hiding behind cover. This is certainly not a third-person cover shooter. This is one where you zip around, zap around, and you know, now you can get some nice verticality on the enemies, and especially it's utilized with the bosses, which I'll talk about more later. But I do like that. It is a fast-paced game where you do have to always be on your toes, and it can be difficult, like I said, but yeah, I think that's pretty cool. A grapple hook in any game just makes it 10 times better, honestly, and you can do some pretty cool stuff with it. The next positive is, so far from what I've seen, is the customization. Okay, the customization here doesn't seem to be all that bad. If you want to, you know, change your character, because the characters are all set, by the way. You can't create your own character, and the characters, you know, they aren't the best, okay? They aren't exactly interesting. They do have, you know, full lore behind them if you care about that kind of thing. For a multiplayer live service game, I'll let you decide that. But the cosmetics here, they look nice, but of course there's going to be tons of them with pay to win. But of course there's going to be a lot of microtransactions and golden armor editions. I'm sure Todd Howard will be very proud of what they release with the cosmetics. But there is a nice level of customization here that can be said with the weapons and stuff as well. But, you know, I never really cared about that kind of thing. I really don't like paying for just looks in any type of game. It just seems like a waste of money if you ask me. But if you are a massive fan of that multiplayer experience, then there is something here for you. Now, before we continue with this First Descendant review, I do hope you are enjoying it. It's not going to be a massively detailed one because there isn't a lot to be said about this. Like I said, it's just a multiplayer live service game. Nothing that amazing or something I can get really analytical about, but I just thought I would cover it because this is the state of AAA games now. This is the state of modern day gaming, and I would say that this is AA, so it does have some, you know, creativity in it. Like I said, the grapple hook, the verticality, and the bosses are quite creative, but everything else in between feels very generic to me, and I'm going to talk more about, you know, the microtransactions in a bit. But this is the state of gaming right now, especially multiplayer games, and it's just very sad because I remember the days, I'm going to sound like a boomer here, but, you know, it used to be about good quality multiplayer experiences, not just like how to keep a game alive. Emperor Palpatine on life support is a good analogy for live service games. You know, it's just how to extend a game's lifespan.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Not necessarily about making great content that's always going to be fun or interesting or rewarding or has actual value to the player in, you know, a story or just fun gameplay. It's just how to keep this gameplay, you know, alive, how to extend it. That's what live service games are all about. They just add more and more content as time continues, and I personally think that the combat itself is actually quite fun. It does remind me a lot of Warframe. It is quite snappy, it does have good feedback. I've been enjoying it, but it's not something I'm going to be continuing to play because it's just not my cup of tea. I just wish we got more multiplayer experiences, like, for example, Remnant from the Ashes. That was a good quality multiplayer game, but we don't get many experiences like that because more and more we're going to be focusing on live service gaming, and that's just the trend because that's where the money is, and it's of course because we get such long dev times and such long times for games to be released nowadays. Instead of making quality smaller titles with creativity, it's all about how to reach the most marketable and shared, you know, thing that can just be played by everyone. It's not about, you know, focused audiences anymore. That's why it feels very generic. But this can be done well. Like I said, No Man's Sky, that's a good example, I guess, of a live service game. I didn't think it would be a live service game, but it became one because it got updates over time. Same with Sea of Thieves. And this does have the potential, but I'm just not quite seeing it as of yet. But it is fun, and that's really all that matters. If you want something to play at the moment that is fun, then I think you'll have a good time with the First Descendant. Luckily, with free-to-play games, you don't have to worry about pre-orders, but still, I will, you know, just caution people, before a game has really found its legs, try and hold off on the microtransactions because it just sets a bad example for, you know, game developers who are chasing this kind of trend, because if they can make quick money and then abandon a game quickly, that's never good. So, you know, hold off, make sure that you're actually enjoying the game before you drop money into it, I would say. So, of course, there are things like emotes, which is always good. You can do a little TikTok Fortnite dance, and maybe by doing that you can regenerate BP points, okay, which stand for brain points, okay. You can regenerate your brain cells from watching too much TikTok if you do a Fortnite dance with a special emote in this. That's high quality gameplay mechanics. When you are doing a multiplayer game, there are things in between that make this game interesting. That, you know, apart from the bosses, the dungeons, and the kind of raids, there are things to keep you interested in this game. It's a lot more fleshed out than I gave it credit for, especially since all of the updates, since beta and all that kind of stuff. So there are side content quests that you can go on, there are even mini games that you can engage with, and there is a lot to do between the missions, which I appreciate, and I'm glad that it didn't go for a massive open world where you have to, you know, run and run and run, and you know, before you do multiplayer or anything like that. They are a little bit more focused here, and the maps are smaller for multiplayer experiences, which I appreciate. And the dungeons, I would say, are the best, where you just go through a horde of enemies, and then at the end, of course, you fight the boss, and then it drops for loot. And I'll talk about the loot system. It is a rarity system, you know, of epic or common or rare or whatever. But sadly, this is not exactly what I wanted, because, you know, they do drop weapons to a degree, but it is also a lot of resources and a lot of resource allocation systems. The story I can't really talk about that much because I haven't seen that much story so far, but you know, the voice acting does seem to be pretty rough around the edges at the moment, and none of the characters, like I said, have much of a personality or really speak to me so far, but it might change later on. And the animations are just, well, yeah. Okay. Now, another negative I would say is that the enemies so far have been very repetitive, okay, with the enemy variation, apart from the bosses, of course, and they are very bullet spongy, and it is quite a grindy game. There is quite a lot of farming in this game, and for some people you're gonna like that, but for me, I like to be, you know, rewarded for my time, and sometimes it just feels like you don't get, you know, like, for example, I know they're very different games, but Borderlands 2 always made you feel like you were progressing, because it would drop legendary weapons quite often, and all of that good stuff. Here, it does feel like a big slog, and I understand this is a multiplayer live service game, so of course I've got to extend that out, but I just think the way they've handled loot and the resources and stuff like that, I'm not a big fan of it. I would prefer if they only focus on, you know, dropping, you know, good items at your level. That would be better in my opinion, instead of this weird resource drop rate that they went for. It's just, yeah, not the best, I would say. And like I said, it doesn't really respect your time, and that's a big thing that I feel this game just doesn't do very well. And the final negative, and then I'll end on a positive, because it's not a bad game, but it's a very mixed game, I would say, is, you know, it is a time sink from the looks of it so far. Hopefully it gets a little bit more balanced and the loot becomes a little bit more interesting. But so far, even the loot that I have got doesn't really excite me that much. Like, it's not like I'm going to stick with this one weapon forever. The thing that keeps this game feeling fresh, like I said, was what I talked about at the start, the modular system with your upgrades, with your abilities. That's where you actually feel like your character is progressing, and I like that a lot. But, you know, for a game like this, I want interesting loot as well, which so far there hasn't been, for me anyway. And finally, let's end on a big bang, a big positive, which is, of course, the goddamn bosses. Now, the bosses here are just great. I think the bosses here are done very well, even better than Destiny 2 to a degree, and many other big multiplayer games with bosses, because they have many different stages to them, and although their moveset is a little bit limited and a little bit boring, and sometimes they can feel a little bit cheesy, like when they just spawn a bunch of like smaller enemies, the tactics that you actually have to use to fight these bosses is so fun. You know, they can spawn out massive AoE attacks where it becomes a little bit of like a bullet hell type experience, which I really like. Like I said, a lot of verticality with the grapple hooks, and the bosses actually have, you know, weak points and, you know, some tactics to them where you really have to work and communicate as a team. And I really like that experience. You can even sometimes grapple onto the bosses and do, you know, like actual physical damage to them, like punch them out, which is pretty cool. And they actually have like a system where you can tear off some of their limbs. It's very well done, and I think that's going to be the main highlight of this game. So, in conclusion, okay, is this a good game? Is it worth your time? I think as a multiplayer experience, this will be fun, especially if you're just focusing on the modular system, building up your character, fighting bosses, clearing out dungeons, but trying to do everything in between. I think it's going to get pretty stale, pretty boring, and it is a grind, and there is going to be a lot of microtransactions, I'm sure. I just hope they're not pay to win type of, you know, microtransactions, but who knows. I can't exactly say that these developers are above that, but we'll just have to wait and see. But so far, what's good is the actual combat itself, and that's the most important thing, the bosses and the dungeons, okay? But the loot, the resources, and the, you know, kind of time to play and the time sink of this type experience just isn't for me at the moment. But if you're looking for just a fun multiplayer game with good bosses, then I would recommend this. But otherwise, I'm not sure if you want to, you know, really dedicate to this game, because it will be a massive time sink. And honestly, that would be fine because, like I said, the combat is good and there's a lot here to like, but I don't think there's enough, and I think it will get very generic and stale, and a lot of the missions, even after just playing it a few times, feel the same to me. But a lot of people like that. I mean, lots of people like Destiny 2, and I don't think it's a bad game. I like it as well, but you know, it just depends how much stamina you have for that type of experience. So that is the First Descendant review, the First Descendant game review. You know, looking at it, early access basically, because it will be updated over time, I'm sure. But I don't think it's a bad game. It's just a little bit generic for me, and it doesn't do enough in its themes and art style to really pull me in. But if you just like a good combat game and good boss design, then this is a good time. It's just not going to be for everyone. But I hope I gave you a very nice balanced review, and you can weigh up, you know, if it's worth playing or not. Is the First Descendant worth playing? I hope you enjoyed this one. It's not usually the type of game I look at, but I'm trying to cover more games on the channel, so I do hope you enjoyed this one. And like I said, if you are new, make sure you do subscribe, hit the bell and like and all of that YouTube stuff, because I never ask. That's probably why the algorithm hates me, so I would appreciate it. And I'll see you next time. Peace out.